It was meant to be a routine royal engagement. But when Queen Camilla took a public jab at Princess Anne, mocking her old-school ways in front of international press, something shifted inside the crown's most loyal warrior. Anne didn't lash out. She didn't scream or storm. Instead, she waited, watched, and quietly planned. What followed was one of the most subtle yet devastating royal takedowns in modern history. Camilla had underestimated the only royal who doesn't play politics, because she doesn't need to. And while the Queen Consort tried to recover, Anne reminded everyone why she's the monarchy's sharpest blade in silence. The public humiliation that sparked it all. It happened at what should have been a flawless event. A prestigious royal engagement at Kensington Palace, with diplomats from across Europe and royal reporters eagerly scribbling notes. A night of poise and protocol, until Queen Camilla made a joke that shattered the room's grace like glass. During an unscripted moment while greeting guests, Camilla turned toward a cluster of journalists and quipped with a dry smile, "Some royals still act like it's 1952, don't they?" The crowd gave a nervous laugh, but all eyes turned to Princess Anne, standing just a few feet away. The implication wasn't subtle. Anne, known for her iron discipline, regimented punctuality, and unapologetically traditional standards, had long carried the weight of royal decorum. Camilla's comment wasn't just sarcasm, it was a very public shot at Anne's legacy. A jab wrapped in lace, delivered with a smirk. Anne didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice or offer a rebuttal, but her expression turned to stone, frozen, unreadable, dangerous. Royal watchers called it the glare of Windsor. Those who know her well recognized the look. It was the moment Anne went from quiet dignity to quiet fury. The clip was broadcast within hours. Royal social media lit up. Viewers worldwide called the moment classless, deliberate, and beneath the crown. Twitter trended with hashtags like "Respect Princess Anne" and "Not So Queenly." By the next morning, commentators were already dissecting the icy undercurrent. It was a power play, one expert said bluntly. Camilla's finally feeling the shadow of Anne, and she lashed out. But what Camilla didn't realize was that Anne, for all her reserved stoicism, doesn't forget. And she certainly doesn't forgive easily. What followed wasn't dramatic. There were no press releases, no furious phone calls. There was only stillness, a silence that signaled something was coming. Because if Camilla thought she could humiliate the Princess Royal in front of the world and walk away unscathed, she'd clearly forgotten who she was dealing with. Anne's pain behind closed doors. On the outside, Anne didn't change. She fulfilled every duty with her usual composure. But behind palace walls, her pain was palpable. Deep, cold, and quietly burning. Sources close to the Princess Royal revealed that she took the insult harder than anyone realized. She'd spent her entire life serving the monarchy. Military ceremonies, rural visits, diplomatic tours, clocking in more engagements than any other royal year after year. And Camilla? She had waltzed in late and was now lobbing cheap insults from a throne. Anne had never needed to prove herself. "I've held this family together longer than she's even been in it," Anne reportedly told her brother Charles later that evening, her voice sharp with restrained rage. It wasn't just an attack on her, it was a betrayal of years of loyalty. Charles listened, torn between his wife and his sister, knowing full well Anne had been the backbone of the firm during every scandal, every family implosion. She had stayed silent through divorces, deaths, and drama, all for the crown. "I stayed silent for the crown," she told one longtime staffer in private, "but not anymore." The real sting came from knowing she had defended Camilla's position from the beginning. When many in the family had kept their distance, Anne had extended professional courtesy, accepting Camilla's presence, allowing her to rise alongside Charles without public resistance. It wasn't warmth, but it was respect, and Camilla had shattered it in one joke. Anne didn't show her hurt in tabloids. She didn't cry in front of staff, but those closest to her saw the shift. Her tone grew shorter, her posture stiffened, and the look in her eyes? That was no longer diplomacy. That was resolve. Because while others plotted with words or gestures, Anne planned in silence. And what Camilla would soon learn was that the most dangerous Windsor is the one who moves without noise. The turning point. A forgotten letter from Diana. It wasn't rage that triggered Anne's next move. It was memory. Weeks after the event, while reviewing archival materials for an upcoming royal exhibit honoring Queen Elizabeth's reign, Anne stumbled upon a box of personal letters long stored away under pull lock and key. Among them, a handwritten letter from Princess Diana, dated during her final years in the palace. The handwriting was unmistakable, fluent, emotional, raw. Anne sat down. She read it once, then again. The contents shook her. In the letter, Diana described her growing fears over Camilla's influence, not just over Charles, but over the very shape of the monarchy. And there it was, in ink. Anne is the only one I truly trust to see past all this. Anne hadn't seen that letter in over 2 decades, and yet now, as Camilla's cruelty echoed fresh in her memory, it felt like a message across time. A reminder. A call to arms. It stirred something deep within her. Not just loyalty to the monarchy, but loyalty to Diana. A woman who had been silenced, manipulated, diminished, and who had seen Anne, not Catherine, not the press, as her quiet ally. In that moment, Anne understood what had to be done. This wasn't just about one insult, it was about the legacy Camilla was trying to rewrite. And Anne wasn't going to let her. That forgotten letter became the spark that lit the fuse. And Anne's revenge? It would come not in tabloids or tantrums, but in strategy, silence, and unshakable Windsor will. The storm was coming, and Camilla had no idea what was about to hit her. Anne's royal power move. Camilla never saw it coming. Just 3 weeks after the Windsor embarrassment, the palace announced a surprising shift. Princess Anne would preside over the upcoming royal military investiture, an event long rumored to be Camilla's next high-profile ceremonial appearance. No explanation was given, no reshuffle announced. But within the palace, everyone knew Anne had pulled rank, quietly, effectively, and completely within protocol. Sources confirmed that Anne had used her decades of service and her standing within the Crown Estate's Advisory Council to block Camilla's involvement in 2 military events, citing her own continued commitments to traditional ceremonial order. The language was polite. The move? Ruthless. Anne didn't gloat. She didn't brief the press. She didn't need to. Camilla had humiliated her with one joke. Anne was dismantling her ceremonial control, one calendar entry at a time. And that wasn't all. Behind palace walls, Anne reinstated several royal protocols Camilla had previously relaxed, including formal dress expectations for state events and the traditional order of royal seating. She even ensured a more prominent role for younger royals like Charlotte and George, symbolically reinforcing Diana's bloodline while subtly freezing Camilla further out of the spotlight. The message was clear. Camilla might have the title, but Anne had the institution. The press picked up on the pattern quickly. "The Crown's silent power shift," one headline read. Another declared, "Anne isn't playing nice anymore." Royal watchers noticed that Camilla, once surrounded by aides and photographers at events, now appeared isolated. Her engagements increasingly solo, carefully scripted, and noticeably smaller in scope. Anne, meanwhile, glided through public duties with crisp precision. She didn't address the feud. She didn't have to. Her revenge wasn't noisy. It was regal, and it was working. Camilla's furious backlash. Camilla was livid. In private, she fumed to Charles about the military event snub, calling Anne's actions a deliberate humiliation campaign. She accused her sister-in-law of turning the monarchy into a schoolyard and demanded Charles intervene. But Charles, for once, didn't budge. "Anne's earned her place," he reportedly told Camilla during a heated exchange. "If there's a rift, you'll need to fix it. She won't come to you." Those words stung. Camilla, long used to Charles's unwavering support, realized she was standing on increasingly shaky ground. She tried to rally supporters within the household, courtiers loyal to her inner circle, but many had gone quiet. Even among staff, whispers had started to spread. Two queens under one roof, and only one throne, one senior aide murmured behind closed doors. Camilla, once the confident power behind Charles's reign, now found herself scrambling. Her speeches were trimmed down, her press appearances restructured. Even the tone of palace releases seemed less celebratory, more cautious. The press wasn't kind either. Opinion pieces labeled her tone-deaf, aloof, and out of step with royal tradition. Social media lit up with memes comparing Anne's military poise to Camilla's retreating public role. #Team Anne began trending. And even some of Camilla's longtime sympathizers started admitting Anne was winning. What Camilla didn't understand was that Anne wasn't just reacting, she was reclaiming. And the palace had already started to choose its side. Anne's rising public popularity. The people noticed. Suddenly, Princess Anne, the no-nonsense, always working, rarely smiling royal, became the nation's unexpected favorite. Crowds at her public appearances grew larger, her applause longer. Reporters started writing glowing features on the Crown's Iron Woman. One viral op-ed titled "Princess Anne, the Quiet Backbone of the Monarchy," captured the mood of the moment. It painted her as the antidote to palace vanity. A woman who didn't chase cameras, didn't peddle personal drama, but simply did the job. And people loved her for it. Polls showed her favorability surge. Among women over 40, she surpassed even Catherine. Among military families, she was practically sacred. Camilla, in contrast, struggled to regain footing. Her image took a blow, not from scandal, but from comparison. In photos, her expressions looked tighter, her posture less confident. Every joint appearance with Charles was picked apart by body language experts, all asking the same thing. Had Camilla lost her place in the public heart? Meanwhile, Anne said nothing. She didn't acknowledge the feud, she didn't grant interviews, but every move, every speech, every appearance beside veterans or children or charity workers spoke volumes. And at a children's hospital visit in Glasgow, a young girl handed her a drawing. On it were two crowns, one labeled Queen, the other Real Queen. Anne smiled for the first time that day, because the truth was undeniable now. She didn't need a throne. She had something far more powerful. the people. The final blow, Anne exposes Camilla's quiet coup. Anne had waited. She'd endured the dig, watched the smirks, and now she had the receipts. While reviewing internal palace communications tied to ceremonial planning, Anne's private secretary uncovered a series of confidential memos, ones that had been buried under the guise of modernizing the monarchy. But when Anne saw them, her eyes narrowed. They weren't modernization. They were manipulation. Camilla's team had allegedly submitted proposals to restructure royal precedents, subtly elevating the Queen Consort above Anne in all ceremonial events. It was a quiet coup, masked in logistics and scheduling jargon. Most royals wouldn't have noticed, but Anne did, and she took action. In a rare private council meeting, Anne arrived early. She sat quietly at the head of the table and laid out the documents in front of senior aides and King Charles himself. No raised voice, no accusations, just cold, regal facts. At the bottom of the final page, Anne reportedly paused, then looked directly at her brother. "This isn't modernization," she said. "It's monarchy by manipulation." The room fell silent. Even Charles, stunned, didn't speak for several seconds. Aides later said his face turned a shade paler as he glanced at the paperwork, and then at the empty chair meant for Camilla. Anne didn't stay to watch him squirm. She stood, nodded curtly, and walked out. Camilla had tried to rewrite the royal order, but Anne had just rewritten the ending. Camilla's retreat from public life. The fallout wasn't gradual. It was instant. Brutal. Unavoidable. Just 72 hours after Princess Anne's quiet power play rocked the royal inner circle, Queen Camilla's name vanished from the official engagement roster. 3 public appearances, including a long-planned charity gala, a state museum opening, and a televised Commonwealth literacy campaign, were abruptly cancelled. The official reason? Health fatigue and overextension. But palace insiders whispered the truth. Camilla was emotionally shaken. More than that, she was politically cornered. Her public image had cracked, and behind that polished exterior, she was unraveling. "There was no spinning this," said one senior aide. "Not even her most loyal courtiers could cover the damage." The press had already turned, and inside the palace, the silence around her was deafening. The Queen Consort, once a dominant figure in the royal machinery, was suddenly invisible. No interviews, no appearances, no photo ops. The woman who had fought so long to sit beside a king had voluntarily disappeared. She retreated to Ray Mill House, her secluded estate in Wiltshire, a place she once called her sanctuary. But this time, it didn't feel like refuge. It felt like exile. Friends close to the family described her as lost, livid, and deeply humiliated. She reportedly snapped at staff, refused visitors, and took long walks through the foggy gardens in silence, replaying Anne's quiet triumph over and over again in her mind. What made it worse? Charles didn't come with her. Though he remained sympathetic behind closed doors, he didn't defend her. He didn't stop the slow withdrawal of duties. He didn't fight Anne. Instead, he urged calm, distance, de-escalation. "Let it rest," he reportedly told Camilla. "She's won the moment. If you push back, it becomes a war." And the last thing Charles wanted was a civil war inside the monarchy, not when the cameras were already watching every move. So Camilla stayed away. Not with drama, not with scandal, but with silence. And that silence spoke louder than any headline. Her portrait still hangs in the gilded halls. Her name remains on ceremonial documents. Her title, unchanged. But inside the palace, the shift was clear. She no longer held the center. Anne had taken it. The public had demanded it. And Camilla's influence vanished. Not by decree, not by disgrace, but by something far more devastating in royal life: irrelevance. Charles's growing regret. Behind palace curtains, the king was unraveling. For months, Charles had played the careful diplomat, juggling fragile loyalties, massaging egos, and trying desperately to maintain the illusion of a united monarchy. He'd walked a tightrope between a sister who had sacrificed everything for the crown and a wife who had fought for her seat beside it. But now, the rope had snapped, and the fall was real. Camilla's retreat from public life had left a glaring absence in palace optics. Her engagements were being quietly reassigned, her speeches postponed, and whispers about her emotional state had begun leaking to trusted royal correspondents. The Queen Consort, once central to Charles's vision of a modern monarchy, had become a public burden. In private, the king was reflective and haunted. "I never should have let it come to this," he reportedly confided to a lifelong friend over a late-night scotch at Highgrove. His voice was low, tired. "I thought keeping peace would protect the crown, but peace without respect isn't peace at all." And so, quietly, almost invisibly, Charles began to act. Anne was summoned to more briefings. Her calendar expanded, taking over sensitive Commonwealth youth initiatives that Camilla had once lobbied hard to manage. Palace insiders noted that Charles began leaning on Anne during high-level planning sessions, even requesting her feedback before finalizing ceremonial strategies. It was subtle at first: a longer seat at the table, a quiet deference to her opinion. But within weeks, palace aides were being instructed to run major ceremonial decisions through Anne first, especially those involving public optics, tradition, or legacy. What had started as damage control became a pivot. It wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic survival. Charles had spent decades dreaming of this reign, of restoring honor to the Windsor name. But now he feared that allowing Camilla too much control and too much spotlight was eroding the very foundation of that dream. The public was watching. The press was circling. And within his own family, loyalty had already begun to shift. Camilla, once his closest confidant, was now politically cornered and socially sidelined. And Anne? She had never asked for more power. She had never demanded a crown, but she was earning the trust of a nation and the quiet obedience of a rattled king. Charles feared it was already too late to repair Camilla's public image, but he could still salvage the monarchy's stability. And so, behind closed doors, he began to reshape the line of influence, not toward the wife who had risen with controversy, but toward the sister who had risen with discipline. Because, in the end, even kings must choose between love and legacy. And Charles had made his choice. A legacy of loyalty, Anne's quiet revenge complete. Princess Anne never once said the word revenge. She didn't need to. Where others spoke, leaked, or postured, Anne remained exactly who she had always been: consistent, composed, ruthlessly efficient. Her uniform never changed: polished boots, tailored coat, signature updo, and that unmistakable look of quiet resolve. She arrived on time. She worked without complaint. She stood beside Charles when duty called. But one thing she never did again was acknowledge Camilla, the woman who once called her a relic of the past. now barely existed in Anne's world. She gave no interviews, released no memoirs, refused to weaponize gossip, because her battle was never about headlines. It was about respect, legacy, loyalty. And Anne had already won. Every appearance she made now echoed with purpose. Each ribbon she cut, speech she delivered, child she knelt beside, was a message. This is what service looks like. This is how royalty leads. Insiders say that during a quiet afternoon tea with Princess Catherine, Anne offered a single line that's already become whispered legend inside palace walls. Some battles are fought with words, others with silence and steel. And the public knew it too. Polls revealed a stunning shift. Anne's approval soared, surpassing even her brother in some surveys. Newspapers rebranded her the unsinkable royal, a nod to her lifetime of quiet resilience. Online forums, once obsessed with younger royals, now filled with posts admiring Anne's fortitude and grace. While Camilla receded from view, Anne only stepped further into her power. She wasn't given the spotlight, she earned it. Commentators noted that she was seen increasingly beside Charles at state functions, often consulted privately by aides before major royal announcements. She had become, in effect, the monarchy's moral compass. As for Camilla, she still held the title. But the title had become a shell, polished but empty. Her influence had evaporated, and the palace no longer revolved around her orbit. Anne didn't need a throne. She had something stronger, the trust of the people, the confidence of the crown, and the unshakable weight of legacy. She'd lived through scandal, seen the monarchy nearly collapse, held it together while others chased headlines or fell into disgrace. And through it all, she never once asked for recognition. But now, she had it, and she wore it not on her head, but in how she walked into a room, with command, with dignity, and with purpose. Revenge didn't need to be loud. It didn't need to be cruel. It just needed to be royal. And in Anne's silence, a legacy was secured. Anne didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. While Camilla retreated, bruised and sidelined, Anne rose, unyielding, unshaken, and more respected than ever. Her revenge wasn't scandal. It was legacy. A legacy forged not in drama, but in duty. And in the end, she didn't need the crown to win.